I want to welcome you to the Meacham Conversations, and today we have Amy Wright. How are you doing?
Great, thank you.
Pretty good. Why don't we start by having you read a poem and talk a little bit about it.
Okay. This is from Cracker Sonnets. Habitat. Mac and Polly cling to the mountainside, sphagnum moss on an abalone camper. Their father collects disability. They are ingenious manipulators of flag girls in parking lots, track stars in waffle joint back booths, French fryers in Ferris wheel top buckets. At home, unable to avoid introducing them to pudding on the sofa, their young mother who makes them pretend she's their sister. Mud puppies cut through a school of crappies, patch the shallows, sprout toes sensitive as tentacles on a slug's head, ascend the muck thin-skinned as newborns, or did back then. Of course, Mac will grow up, start a tree-trimming business, meet Scotty, who isn't afraid of his wolf pup or long silences, how a hard storm closes their exit. Imperiled water shrews and hellbender playthings give her something to lose in that nothing much mobile. A freshwater turtle she feeds periodically, a handful of cereal that crackles when wet like maggots. Do you want to move someplace else? Mac asks after love-making, her nape wet, fan blades slowing with her pulse. Eddie has a body shop in Lafayette. Scotty pulls a squirrel's tail curl through a hairbrush she keeps near the bed, like all Perry women. Away from here, I wouldn't know what it looks like to be happy, she says. I would test it, the way a girl will suffer her love to prove his love real. Wouldn't hear the mourning dove or see the blazing star nod its fandango ascent from a far field. No, it's better to know chorus frogs are in danger, the lake sturgeon almost lost. What are those creatures to me I cannot be sorry never to have seen?
It's interesting the way all those natural images come in and kind of modify, contextualize the characters and characterizations. Mm-hmm. Is that something that goes throughout the whole book? How do you make the connections between, say, that poem and the other poems in the book?
I think the natural world is always a connection to me between people and culture and nature and how they interact. Those are themes that run throughout my work and throughout these poems in particular. The natural world and how it informs culture. And specifically, I read that poem as a kind of endangered culture because as I've grown up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the landscape has changed. Of course, there's logging and the loss of natural species, but also the loss of a kind of isolation or distance from the town. I mean, it was a dirt road when I grew up. It's paved now. And so I think there's just more of a sense that both the natural world and the distinctive cultures of Appalachia are in danger of fading or assimilating or becoming something else. And so that's one of the things that I think about a lot.
Yeah, and does that go over into your prose too?
Definitely. It was a really special thing to be able to grow up in a rural area right outside of Jefferson National Forest. And I appreciate that and value it so deeply, but it's also, I guess, just the desire to act or to change or to do something to protect the land. It wasn't necessarily something that I thought about when I was little because it was such a wild area, and you had the sense that the natural world was all powerful and omnipresent and stronger than people, and it was larger and and now it seems like there's more and more taking of the natural resources, and it seems much more vulnerable than it did once. And so I try to write with the impulse to preserve and to raise awareness of the endangered landscapes and species.
Yeah, the poems also struck me as a little bit Wordsworthian in the sense it comes out of that
Right.
tradition.
I think, yeah, I think definitely there's that. I was fortunate enough to have a childhood that was free of a lot of the preoccupations of some children. So I really did just get to play wild in the landscape with my brother and just, explore the territory.
That's great.
Yeah.
And how would you relate the landscape where you are now, sense of place where you are now, to that where you brought up?
Well, now I live in a city, and so it's very different. But for the first 8 years that I lived in Clarksville, Tennessee, I had a one-bedroom apartment that I lived on just a road, a main artery into the city. And then while I was living there, just in that span of time, they cleared a mountainside, small hill of trees. And, and I didn't even know they could terraform the land that dramatically. They just leveled it and turned it into a shopping center. And so I moved to a place where there's a farm in my backyard now. And so it's as close as I could come in the city to that kind of natural landscape.
And you're not too far away from a lot of real natural areas.
Well, actually, the river runs
between the lakes and
the Cumberland River runs really close in my backyard. I can't see it when the leaves are in bloom, but there was actually a bobcat that came into my yard just a month ago. So it's closer than you think. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you read another poem out of that? I'm just kind of curious to see how they echo off against one another.
I'll choose it. They're very different ones. Some of them have to do with with religion. I think that's also a big theme, and so.
Well, that in a sense goes back to the Wordsworth too. Was for him, I mean, he wasn't like Coleridge, more of a pantheist, but for him, it was a kind of a religion. We used to have a friend who was Native American, and instead of going to church, we would take him out to the woods to look over a valley, and he would say, "This is my church," in that sense.
Yeah, and actually, when I've written about this in prose, I began writing about it in poetry as the Appalachian Sublime. And because I don't mention the Appalachian Sublime as a specific phrase in this collection, but the idea that I was right on the cusp of something that was both interesting and beautiful and awe-inspiring and terrifying, because it still had the sense that it was unknown. Sure. And so I felt like, it was just right on that edge of like looking into something that I didn't entirely understand. And that is, religious or spiritual.
Yeah, sure.
But then you also have my grandfather on my dad's side was a Pentecost holiness preacher. And so you had a very different perspective there. And so this poem is about that. It's titled Godfrey's Challenge Pentecost Values. Ava saw a family riven by liquor, sober. Her grandfather preach out a string of venom, hammered on the prophet's word, called to leave carpentry, swap his father's brew for one that never, even when money runs out, stops flowing. The podium skinned of its worldly varnish, a dozen incomprehensible tongues licking the body's vents. His wife allowed herself to be taken over by the yes, yes, Lord, that realm which surpasseth understanding. Ava's love for her, the color of locusts. She left them. The way grandfather's father would go on a month-long drunk, piss the bed, spend every red cent of grocery money. Eyes flickered distant, arms raised away from her. Then they came back. He even stayed years without touching a drop. Fire receded to a blue glint, and she'd make beans and biscuits.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good having you here.
Thank you.